Germanic kingship refers to the customs and practices surrounding kings among the pre-Christianized Germanic tribes of the migration period and the kingdoms of the early Middle Ages. The title of king is in origin that of the leader elected as sacral and military leader from out of a noble family, usually considered of divine ancestry. In the pre-Christianization period, the Germanic monarchies were originally pre-Christianized, but the contact during the Völkerwanderung, a migration period, with the Roman Empire and the Christian Church greatly altered the structure and developed into the feudal monarchy of the High Middle Ages. The derisive term Barbarian Monarchy is sometimes used in the context of those Germanic rulers who after AD 476 and during the 6th century ruled territories formerly part of the Western Roman Empire, especially the barbarian kings of Italy. In the same context, Germanic law is also derisively termed leges barbarorum, barbarian law, etc. Terminology. The English term king is derived from the Anglo-Saxon syning, which in turn is derived from the common Germanic *Königas. The common Germanic term was borrowed into Estonian and Finnish at an early time, surviving in these languages as kuningas. The term is notably different from the word for king in other Indo-European languages. It is a derivation from the term *kunjom kin by the Inga suffix. The literal meaning is that of a scion of the kin, or perhaps son, a descendant of one of noble birth. There were other terms for the Germanic king in early Germanic languages, derived from the word for the people, the nation, rather than kin. These are Old Norse Fylkir and Gothic Theudens. Comparable terms did not necessarily refer to a king but to any member of the nobility, e.g., Old English Triton, Theoden and Aetheling. In Germanic poetry, kennings in use for king or lord include Old English Birgifa, giver of rings. Jarl was a title for a chieftain, a leader of a small force of men below the level of kingship. The English lord is another kenning for a chieftain, without parallels in other Germanic languages. Old Norse hovding was a term for chieftain, literally headman. The Latinate captain introduced in the late medieval period has the same meaning. Germanic pre-Christianization kingship. The Germanic king originally had three main functions: to serve as judge during the popular assemblies, to serve as a priest during the sacrifices, to serve as a military leader during wars. The office was received hereditarily, but a new king required the consent of the people before assuming the throne. All sons of the king had the right to claim the throne, which often led to co-rulership where two brothers were elected kings at the same time. This evolved into the territories being considered the hereditary property of the kings, patrimonies, a system which fueled feudal wars, because the kings could claim ownership of lands beyond the de facto rule. As a sort of pre-Christianization high priest, the king often claimed descent from some deity. In the Scandinavian nations, he administered pagan sacrifices at important cult sites, such as the temple at Uppsala. Refusal to administer the blots could lead to the king losing power. According to the testimony of Tacitus, some early Germanic peoples had an elective monarchy already in the 1st century. They choose the kings by birth, the generals for merit. These kings have not unlimited or arbitrary power, and the generals do more by example than by authority. Germanic pre-Christianization society had three levels: the king, the nobility, and the free men. The respective political influence was negotiated at the thing. According to the testimony of Tacitus, about minor matters the chiefs deliberate, about the more important the whole tribe. Yet even when the final decision rests with the people, the affair is always thoroughly discussed by the chiefs. The multitude think proper, they sit down armed. Silence is proclaimed by the priests, who have on these occasions the right of keeping order. Then the king of the chief, according to aged birth, distinction in war, or eloquence, is heard, more because he has influence to persuade than because he has power to command. If his sentiments displease them, they reject them with murmurs. If they are satisfied, they brandish the spears. Tacitus notes that as each tribe had its own customary law, the political power of the king could vary between nations. Thus, he states that the Gothones were ruled by kings, a little more strictly than the other German tribes, but not as yet inconsistently with freedom, while beyond the Gothones, the Rugii and Lemuvii lived in servile submission to the kings. Later development. With the decline of the Roman Empire, many of its provinces came under the rule of Germanic kings. Hispania to the Visigoths, Italia to the Ostrogoths, Gallia to the Franks, Britannia to the Anglo-Saxons, and Africa to the Vandals. These nations had by then been in contact with Rome for a century or more and had adopted many Roman customs. They had also been Christianized, and pre-Christianization practice was slowly being replaced. The Frankish state under the Merovingian dynasty had many of the characteristics of Germanic monarchy under heavy influence from secular and ecclesiastic Rome. Its kings, through the division of the territory, treated it not as a state independent of themselves, but as the patrimony, land won by conquest. The king was primarily a war leader and a judge. There are many theories to explain the collapse of Merovingian power, most of which blame the inability of later Merovingians in war as an important factor. The commonly cited occasion of Sigebert III sobbing in his saddle after a defeat highlights the importance of victory in battle for a king who is chiefly a warrior. The principle of election, which determined Germanic succession, was abandoned in those states under the heaviest influence from the papacy, such as Merovingian Gaul, where hereditary succession and the divine right of the reigning dynasty was recognized. In Anglo-Saxon Britain, the principle survived until the Norman conquest removed it. Anglo-Saxon kings were elected by the Witena-Gemot. Finally, the principle survived in some form or other for centuries after the demise of the last Germanic monarchies. The civil wars of medieval Scandinavia and the electorate of the Holy Roman Empire are part of its legacy. List of Germanic monarchies.